وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا وَالْمُعَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُم, etc. That the poor due is for the poor and the downtrodden. So the fuqara and the masakin, which indicates that there are some people who are poor, who are the recipients of this money, and there are some people who are wealthy, who have to pay it. Now, how much is it? It's 2.5%. 2.5%. Which isn't oppressing anyone. If you're wealthy, to pay 2.5% of your wealth for the poor people is not particularly taxing for anyone. But if everyone paid it, just think of the tremendous amounts of wealth that will be available for those who are poor and deprived. If you just start doing the math, you can see that there will be a tremendous pool of wealth and resources for those people. So again, there's a balance that's being advocated. And we believe everything in this creation has been established on the basis of a balance. So وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ, that God created the heavens and earth, and then He established the balance. أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ. And He's established this balance, and He's warned you that you don't disrupt this balance. So there's a balance in society. There's a balance in gender relations. There's a balance in class relations. There's a balance in the various ecosystems that have been established. And our challenge as human beings is not to disrupt the balance that has been established by God. Oftentimes we disrupt it, think we're doing good, and great harm results. And many of you could readily think of many examples of that. The same pertains in gender relations. In gender relations, there are different roles and responsibilities for men and women. And collectively they establish a balance between the man and the woman, which allows healthy social life to exist. When we, and this is my interpretation, as I've been taught, of Islamic teachings in this regard. So I'm not saying all Muslims feel this way. I think a fair number do, but I'm not going to overgeneralize. That the man and woman exist in the context of a relationship. And that relationship is predicated on a differentiation of roles and responsibilities. Now, this is separate from a discussion of rights. They're equal before God. Their deeds are rewarded equally. Their religious responsibilities in terms of prayer and fasting are rewarded equally. And if there are any divine punishments to be ascribed, they're equally proscribed for men and women. So there's no punishment for a woman who's engaged in some sexual indiscretion and the man just walks away. So periodically there's some controversy in the paper along those lines. There has no basis in Islamic teaching. But socially, there are roles and there's a differentiation between those roles, and that differentiation allows for our society to function. If everyone's doing the same thing, and everyone assumes the same roles, and everyone assumes the same rights and responsibilities equally across the board, and that differentiation is lost, then we believe that balance will be upset. And when that balance is upset, there will be social turmoil and social chaos. So, equality before the law, yes. Equality before God, yes. But exact equality in terms of social roles and responsibilities, no. Historically, like most traditional societies, including this country, until recent times, the last few decades, generally a woman's roles were constructed around her domestic responsibilities and duties. Not meaning women weren't to be educated, Islamic history until very recent history, recent times rather, you see an unbroken chain of highly educated women. There were even women who wrote their husbands' books and edited their husbands' books, and their husbands became famous. And only students who look deeply into these matters know the reality of the situation. One of these was the great Hanafi scholar Imam al-Kasani, who was the author of one of the great books in Islamic law, a great compendium, Bada'i al-Sanaya, a very great book. It's understood his wife edited the book and assisted him. There was the great teachers at one time in Islamic Spain, Al-Andalus. There were 5,000 women alive at one time who had memorized the entire Sahih Bukhari, the entire compendium of prophetic tradition of Sahih Bukhari, considered the most authentic book in prophetic tradition. 5,000 women had memorized that book. So education was encouraged, even though the woman's role was consistent with the traditional role of most women in most societies. It was more a domestic role, but it was understood the women are going to be the first teachers of the children. Therefore, if you keep your women ignorant, you're going to have ignorant children. And if you have ignorant children, eventually you're going to have an ignorant and weak society. So the domestic role was not an excuse to keep women ignorant. And even to this day, in Oman, one of the Gulf states, it's very common practice for women to learn the Quran, and then they're the first teachers of their male and female children of the Quran. So the idea that a primarily domestic role negates education is a false dichotomy that has never, well, historically hasn't existed until very recent times. Exceptional women have always had an impact on society. So you see great teachers, great thinkers, great educators, even great political figures throughout the history of Islam. And there are even encyclopedias of great influential Muslim women. As I said, until very recent times when colonization disrupted the natural harmony and balance of Muslim societies. And one way that it did that, in addition to internal decay, so we're not saying, oh, colonization is responsible for every woe in the Muslim world, but it did accelerate certain developments. The colonizing armies generally who came were men. And they were coming from Europe at a time when there was no such thing as women's liberation in Europe. So they were coming to Muslim societies and elsewhere, such as Latin America, Central America, the Caribbean, and various non-Muslim parts of Africa and the Muslim world. And they were bringing extremely patriarchal attitudes on the one hand, and they were bringing male domination, because generally conquering armies don't travel with large numbers of women. So men were in charge, and one of the phenomenon that Ibn Khaldun, who's considered one of the first sociologists in the modern sense of the word, noted, is that conquered people generally imitate their conquerors. And so Muslims tended to imitate the ways and take on and adopt the attitudes of the conquering armies. And those attitudes were extremely patriarchal during that period of time, during the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century, as Europeans went out and then conquered large swaths of the world. And those attitudes, you can see as they are adopted and become institutionalized in Muslim society, you see an end of traditions of great Muslim women scholars. You see an end of Muslim women being involved in some areas where they were involved in political affairs. You see this coming to an end. So this is one thing. The bottom line, there is a balance. And we believe that balance has to be respected, that it doesn't necessarily in everything mean a replication of roles, but